There are many things that frighten us more than they actually harm us, and we often suffer more from worry than from reality. Seneca. We are not truly defeated by what happens to us, but by what we imagine will happen. That saying slices like a sharp blade deep into the familiar territory of the mind, where fear stops being a simple instinct for survival and becomes an automatic machine churning out suffering. We conjure ghosts from hazy possibilities, spin entire dramas from things that have never existed, and then tremble before the very illusions our own minds have created. The mind is like a pitch-dark room where a harmless piece of rope lies quietly in the corner. But let the light of perception twist even slightly, and that rope instantly transforms into a deadly snake. We startle and our hearts race not because the snake is real, but because we are utterly convinced it is. That is the true nature of anxiety. It needs no reality. Only a possibility is enough to sow terror. With our instinct for survival, humans constantly strive to predict and prevent danger. Yet when prediction goes beyond its limits, it turns into endless worry. We live more in the future than in the present, enduring pain over things that have not happened and may never happen. At that point, fear is no longer a useful warning signal, but an invisible prison that confines the soul. Once we realize that most of our pain comes from how we interpret events rather than from the events themselves, we begin to face reality directly raw, perhaps, but far less terrifying than the wild stories our minds invent in the dark. Reality is rarely as cruel as the horrifying tales our imagination weaves in the shadows. Living mindfully is the art of clearly distinguishing between what is and what might be. When the light of awareness returns, that snake turns back into an innocent rope. And in that very moment, we not only break free from fear, but reclaim mastery over our own minds. The joy we rarely experience brings us the greatest delight. Epictetus. Pleasures that repeat too often gradually lose their original allure, while rare moments, fragile as lightning flashing across a vast night, etch themselves deeply into memory and awaken the most intense delight. This is no accident. It is the mind's sophisticated adaptation mechanism. When experiences repeat, the brain flattens emotion to conserve energy, making joy feel ordinary and dull. In contrast, rare events carry surprise, scarcity, and an overwhelmingly high perceived value, opening the mind wide like a long-sealed door suddenly flooded with brilliant light. A person living beside a vast ocean, surrounded by endless water, eventually stops noticing the priceless value of every single drop. Yet, if stranded in a barren desert, even one small sip becomes a sacred blessing. Joy works the same way. It does not bloom from abundance, but from rarity and depth of experience. The waiting, the longing, even the periods of absence season the emotion, so that when joy finally arrives, it is not a fleeting, pleasant feeling, but a complete, radiant explosion of awareness. Life does not need to be filled with constant pleasures. On the contrary, the empty spaces, the pauses, and even the lacks are fertile soil where joy can take root and blossom. When we learn to cherish what arrives infrequently, a chance encounter, a heartfelt word spoken from the soul, or simply a rare moment of peace, we not only feel joy more deeply, but also reshape how we see life itself. No longer a string of days to be filled with noise, but a journey sensed with all the subtlety and sensitivity of the soul. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you do not have. Remember that what you now possess was once the very thing you only dreamed of. Epicurus. We often gaze toward distant horizons, fixated on what we do not yet possess, and unwittingly forget that our own hands are already holding the dreams that once made our hearts race with longing. Unchecked desire is like an endless thirst. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. The more we attain, the emptier we feel. In our frantic chase after the not yet, we quietly erode the value of the already here, turning once sacred things into the ordinary, even forgotten in the background of our minds. Humans tend to normalize what is familiar, an intelligent adaptation mechanism, yet also a double-edged sword. Yesterday, you desperately longed for the position, the relationship, the life you now have. Today, now that it is real, gratitude quietly gives way to endless comparison and dissatisfaction. Like a mountaineer who has conquered the peak, they no longer pause to admire the path they have climbed, but instead look up for another mountain higher, farther, always just out of reach. Yet if we pause for even a single moment, we realize that the true value of life lies not in endlessly acquiring more, but in the ability to recognize and cherish what we already have. The things you now hold, whether a warm home, a stable job, or simply a peaceful day without storms, were once your own silent prayers from the past. When we learn to return to the present and view everything through the eyes of our former selves, we stop feeling lack and instead experience a profound sense of fullness, not from having more, but from fully understanding the worth of what we already possess. 1,000 words cannot leave as deep an impression as a single action. Henrik Ibsen. 1,000 words, no matter how beautiful, are like smoke drifting through the air. They may catch attention for a moment, but they vanish quickly unless anchored in reality. In contrast, even a modest action is like a deep carving in stone, silent yet enduring, powerful enough to shape how others see and remember us. People do not truly trust what they hear. They trust what they see and feel directly. When a promise is not backed by action, it creates a void in perception, and trust slowly erodes over time. But when action is present, it needs no explanation. Its very existence is the most powerful affirmation. Action carries the weight of commitment, responsibility, and sincerity, qualities that words, no matter how refined, can rarely capture in full. Words are like an elaborate architectural blueprint full of dreams, while action is the solid, real building. A blueprint can be perfect and magnificent on paper, but only when it is brought into existence does it become something touchable, enduring, and capable of leaving a mark in life. Therefore, the true worth of a person lies not in how eloquently they speak, but in what they actually do and to what extent. When action and words become one, that person creates not just a fleeting impression, they leave an eternal mark that time cannot erase. You must learn the rules of the game, and then you must play better than anyone else. Albert Einstein. No one can conquer a system without first understanding exactly how it works. The rules of the game here are not just surface-level regulations, but the hidden structure, the unspoken standards, inner drives, and gaps that most people never notice. Without grasping the rules, every effort is merely blind collision with harsh reality. But once you understand them completely, the world is no longer a confusing maze. It becomes a strategic chessboard where every move can be calculated with precision. Yet knowing the rules is only the foundation. The key to success lies in playing better than anyone else. This is not mere competition, but a journey of sharpening the mind, building inner discipline, and mastering superior strategic flexibility. The masterful player does not just follow the rules, they exploit them fully, bend them within allowed limits, and sometimes turn constraints themselves into unexpected advantages. Like a great artist, they do not break the frame arbitrarily, but master it so completely that they can create freely within its boundaries. Two people step into the same game. The first just wants to get it over with, while the second observes carefully, analyzes deeply, experiments, fails, and keeps adjusting. Over time, the gap between them no longer stems from their starting points, but from the depth of perception and the quality of every action. The second player gradually discovers the invisible moves, opportunities others overlook, risks others never foresee. Life is not a random series of events, but a system that can be read and mastered. When you learn the rules, you escape passivity. And when you play better than everyone else, you do not merely exist in the game, you become the one who shapes it. The more clearly you understand yourself and what you want, the less you let the things that don't matter upset you. Stephanie Perkins. Most sorrow does not come from the outside world, but from the deep uncertainty within our own hearts. When a person has not yet truly understood themselves, what they value, what they need, and what they are willing to let go, they become a fragile leaf swept along by every passing breeze of emotion. A careless word can wound them deeply. A fleeting glance can make them doubt themselves. It is not because the world is too harsh, but because inside they have not yet built a solid center of gravity to tell what is worth their attention and what is merely meaningless noise. When you begin to explore yourself like a persistent explorer diving deep into your inner world, you gradually draw a detailed map of your values, boundaries, and deepest longings. At that point, emotions stop being the ruler and become valuable signals you can read. You no longer react automatically to everything. You learn to select what deserves your precious energy. Judgments from the outside world lose their power because you now possess a clear internal compass far stronger than any surrounding noise. Understanding yourself is like sharpening the focus of a lens. Once the image is crisp and vivid, you are no longer distracted by the blurry details around it. You know your destination clearly, so you do not need to stop at every fork in the road. And that very clarity brings a special kind of peace, not because life is free of problems, but because you no longer let every problem drag you into the abyss. When the inner self has found its steady center, the unpleasant things simply drift past lightly, like a breeze across a deep lake, unable to stir up large waves. The foolish man seeks happiness in the distance. The wise man grows it under his feet. James Oppenheim. We often believe happiness is a faraway destination once we reach it. Every inner emptiness will instantly be filled. The foolish man here is not someone lacking intelligence, but someone who keeps postponing joy. They plant happiness in the future, in conditions that have not yet occurred, and unwittingly turn the present into barren ground filled only with waiting and endurance. They are like someone standing on fertile soil, yet endlessly wandering in search of a mythical garden on the horizon, unaware that this very forgetfulness leaves them ever poorer in feeling. The wise man is not the one who possesses more, but the one who sees more deeply. They understand that happiness is not the final reward at the end of the journey, but the very way we walk the path. Instead of chasing distant illusions, they turn back and embrace what already exists right now. A moment of peace, a genuine relationship, or simply the feeling of living fully with oneself. They cultivate happiness like a patient gardener, not in haste, not in fantasy, but by tending every small detail, trusting that this quiet accumulation will create an inner garden that stays green and enduring forever. When you anchor happiness in the present, you reclaim control over your own life. You no longer depend on external variables, but build an inner source of energy that can renew itself every day. And in that very moment, you discover a profound paradox. The thing you once longed for in the distance has always been right beneath your feet. You simply never bent down to admire it. The reason people find it hard to be happy is that they always see the past as better than it was, the present as worse than it is, and the future as less certain than it will be. Marcel Pagnol. There is a silent, distorting filter operating in the human mind that makes us see the world not as it truly is, but through a lens warped by emotion and memory. The past, once it has receded, is polished by nostalgia. Pains are erased, beautiful moments exaggerated, so we believe back then was always gentler and more perfect than it really was. The present, on the contrary, has its pressures and shortcomings magnified. We stand in the flow of life, yet only see the jagged stones beneath our feet and forget the vast sky above. And the future, being unformed, becomes a land of uncertainty where imagination often paints darker scenarios than hopeful ones. This very distortion creates a persistent dissatisfaction. We mourn a past that was never entirely real, grow weary of a present we have not seen clearly, and fear a future that has not yet arrived. The mind is like a warped mirror reflecting everything crookedly. The past becomes shimmering and dreamlike, the present appears dull and bleak, and the future is shrouded in thick fog. When we live inside that frame of reference, happiness always seems out of reach, not because it does not exist, but because we keep pushing it away into places that are not real. You begin to adjust your own perception. Look at the past with absolute honesty, accepting that it held both brilliant light and dark shadows. Learn to dwell fully in the present, not as someone trapped, but as someone truly alive, feeling both the hardships and the quiet values hidden within. And view the future not through the lens of fear, but with your own powerful capacity to adapt. When the mirror of the mind is straightened, the world remains the same, yet your experience of it changes completely, and that is when happiness finally becomes possible, clear, and closer than ever before. Happiness lies within. It has nothing to do with how many compliments you receive or how many people admire you. Happiness comes when you believe you have done something truly meaningful. Martin Yan. If we believe happiness is something given from the outside through compliments, recognition, or admiring glances from others, then we have misunderstood. Those things are by nature only fleeting echoes, like applause in a theater, lively in the moment but quickly fading once the crowd disperses. If you build your sense of self-worth on such transient sounds, you will remain forever trapped in waiting and dependence, waiting to be recognized before feeling good enough, waiting to be praised before believing your life has meaning. True happiness does not work that way. It does not come from how others see you, but from how clearly and honestly you see yourself. When you accomplish something truly meaningful, even if no one witnesses it, no one praises it, there is still a quiet but solid feeling that spreads from deep inside, like a foundation placed exactly where it belongs. That is the moment you need no comparison, no proof, because you know you have lived in alignment with your own core values. This is the shift from external motivation to a profound inner drive. When you act only to be recognized, you unwittingly hand control of your emotions to others. But when you act for the meaning you believe in, you take that entire power back for yourself. At that point, the outside world may still be noisy and full of subjective judgments, yet it no longer has the ability to define or control you. Happiness is like a warm flame. If it is lit by praise, it will flicker with every wind of life. But if it is nourished from within, from the feeling that you are doing what is right and full of meaning, it will burn steadily, quietly, but persistently through time. And it is that inner flame that truly warms your soul for the long journey, no matter how the outside world changes. Our envy always lasts longer than the happiness of those we envy. Heraclitus. The joy of others is often brief and fleeting, yet the envy it stirs in us has far greater staying power. When someone achieves success or happiness, that brilliant moment in their life may flash like lightning, but in the mind of the observer, it stretches on, repeats endlessly, and grows larger with every replay. Envy is not a momentary reaction, but a process of endlessly chewing over emotion, where we keep comparing, imagining, and deepening our own sense of lack. This happens because the human mind clings tightly to whatever threatens the ego. The joy of another, when it touches our inner incompleteness, stops being a neutral event and turns into a mirror reflecting what we still lack. Instead of welcoming it as inspiration, we unconsciously turn it into proof of our own inadequacy. That very process makes envy last, not because the other person is still immersed in happiness, but because we continue quietly feeding the comparison inside our own heads. Two parallel timelines exist. One is the real life of the other person, where joy comes and goes according to its natural rhythm. The other is the flow of our own mind, where that moment is frozen and replayed without end. Envy, therefore, is not the product of external circumstances, but the result of how we process memory and emotion. This is our chance to set ourselves free. Instead of letting another's joy linger in our minds as a source of pain, we can transform it into precious data, a clear signal showing what we truly desire. When comparison is replaced by deep understanding, envy stops being a chain that binds us and becomes the starting point for our own growth. And at that moment, we no longer live forever in the shadow of someone else's happiness, but begin to create genuine happiness for ourselves.